I'm Tom Swip, owner of Swip Systems, and here to talk a little bit about the cloud. So if you don't know a lot about it, don't feel bad. Whoever spun the top on the marketing term, the cloud, was just brilliant. I don't know where the term actually came from, but it is a lot of what we've been using over the last probably 20 years. But it's just with a different marketing spin on it, and it has advanced and evolved and things along those lines. But it's really kind of ethereal, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So if you're not sure what the cloud is, you're right there with most people. I read an article the other day. It said nobody knows what the cloud is, but everybody wants to use it. You know, that's basically what it's all about. So really it's about understanding the cloud, the security, and the players involved. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of dig a little bit deeper here and kind of uncover some of the questions about it, some of the things that are going on inside of it, and everything like that. So we're going to start with this first slide. What is the cloud? So really how it's defined is it's an on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet on a pay-per-usage basis. So what does that really mean? Traditional way of using networks and internet was to create your own network. You know, attach out to an internet, put your own servers up on the internet, and do whatever you needed to do to get connected to them. So what happened was a lot of people started seeing that there was a very good opportunity here to kind of consolidate some of these resources and bring them into a centralized location and provide them on demand, and as a result of providing them on demand, charge you and I monthly until we're done with the services, which is a great marketing model. It's kind of a marriage in some ways. They have something that's awesome that you need, and as a result they have very profitable companies that the different cloud companies run as a result of it. IT resources, we'll get down in the list a little bit later, but it can be infrastructure, it can be platform, it can be software. There's a lot of different things that that are available to you out in the cloud as resources. Via the internet, it is the same old internet that we've been using. It is the same server structures that we've been using. It's just been given a slightly different name and clustered in a slightly different manner. And once again, typically on a pay-per-usage basis. So the biggest point about using the cloud is it's an economical alternative to managing your own servers. So like I mentioned before, if I wanted to put up a website, I had to go to like an AT&T hosting company, or I had to go to one of the big players that were out there, or I would buy rack space in a data center, and I would put my own servers in place, and I would put my software on them, and I'd have to manage them, and I'd have to make sure the Windows updates and Unix updates were in place. I'd have to make sure that my internet connection was there. There was a lot of things that we had to take care of ourselves. So it's especially for startup organizations, you know, like what we see here at the Venture Cafe and CIC, it's a great way to get a lot of bandwidth, a lot of power very quickly. So it's very economical in most cases, and once again, pay per use. Is it the same thing as the last 20 years? It really is. So the days of Yahoo, you know, before Google even ever came about, you know, Yahoo was yet another heuristic online oracle, is what Yahoo stood for and stands for. And they had the same kind of thing going. They had their own private clouds going. So they had massive amounts of servers, massive bandwidth. You would send a search up to the internet. Yahoo would spread it out over their server farm, come back with the answer, and then give you your results. And they were always proud to brag about the milliseconds down in the lower left-hand corner that it took for their search results. So they were kind of the first cloud that was out there. But over the years, different companies started saying, well, you know what, these types of massive server farms and massive capability are needed for the Boeings of the world, the Emersons of the world, and the startups of the world that need to spin up their servers. So they started using that same technology to really break it down so that other people, you and I, could consume the cloud in different ways, and they could make more money off of it. You know, before, Yahoo was mostly an advertising model. You would type in cats and they would pop up their ads, and then they would charge the people on the other end that were putting the ads up. Well, now they can actually charge you for the next items on the list: infrastructure as a service, IaaS, platform as a service, they call it PaaS, or software as a service, they call SaaS. So infrastructure as a service is really an entire network of servers, routers, switches, firewalls, all the things that make up a network, and they're offering you an entire platform by which you can run. That also includes the infrastructure, then includes your platforms, which is your platform as a service, and that is your operating systems, your Unix platforms, Windows platforms, things along those lines. And then what most people are familiar with, which is software as a service. Software as a service, the most popular example of that is Salesforce. You log on to Salesforce, and you use their service, you use their software, and you just pay for them 65 bucks a month, I think it is, per user per month, and off you go. So Salesforce is a really good example. Salesforce is a traditional web application. It's a traditional website, but spin the top on the marketing a little bit, and it's a software as a service platform inside of the cloud. So it's a lot of what we're used to using, but it's also being looked at and grouped in a different way. So now there are also different types of clouds. One of them is a private cloud. So you might find a private cloud at an organization like Boeing, for instance. They might rent a cage down here at Contigix, for instance, downtown, and they would move all of their computing power into Contigix, put it behind a lock cage, and they might take up 1/3 of a floor on Contigix, and they have a private cloud in that respect. So all of their organizations all around the world, all their mobile workforce, everybody like that uses that cloud. A community cloud is put up for communities of developers, communities of users, where there's a specific group of users, a user community that consumes that cloud. A public cloud is what we're going to talk a lot about today. This is things like Amazon, Google, the different platforms that are out there and available. And then a hybrid cloud, which is a combination of both a private cloud and a public cloud. So let's take that example where Boeing is in a cage down in the data center downtown in that private cloud. They might also have some servers in the public space that might be their Salesforce, or it might be their own CRM that they run, or it could be a failover so that if the private cloud goes down, they can flip a couple of switches, or it happens automatically and the hybrid cloud takes over. So a lot of different combinations of or types of cloud that are out there. So now next question, who is the cloud? And there are a lot of players involved. What I've done here is kind of summarize some of the most popular ones. Amazon, which you all know, largest retail, essentially, website in the world. And the name Amazon is very fitting. These guys are just unbelievable. If you ever see the warehouses and things that they produce, it's amazing. And the same stands for their cloud. So their cloud is called AWS, Amazon Web Services. And Amazon Web Services is a place where all different kinds of companies, ours included and our customers included, put their websites so that you are able to consume them on your end. So a developer would create a website, they would create a database, they would go to AWS, buy AWS space. Now remember, I'm not buying servers and I'm not buying racks and routers and switches and firewalls. I'm buying server time, essentially, that includes all those things. And they would put their websites up there, and then you as consumers and me as a consumer and a user would be able to consume those down. You're probably on Amazon 50% of the time that you're on the internet and you don't even realize that you're on AWS. It looks like and it feels like Salesforce. It looks like and it feels like those things, because Salesforce doesn't want to invest in data centers, hardware, routers, switches, firewalls, all of that. Beanstalk is a subsection of Amazon. Beanstalk is a set of database services and web services. So AWS is the whole, Beanstalk is the inside web serving architecture. EC2 is the Elastic Compute Cloud, and the Elastic Compute Cloud allows organizations such as the SLU that you mentioned, if you needed to buy a bunch of computing time and crunch something like the human genome when they were crunching all that information, that kind of thing could have been done on EC2. And then S3 is their storage. So it's just a storage place, like you see Dropbox and you see OneDrive and all those things. So another key player is Microsoft. Microsoft has their Azure cloud. They don't slice it and dice it as much as Amazon and as Google do. They say, here's our cloud, and then we also offer you SQL database. So if you've ever heard of SQL Server, SQL database is kind of a subset of SQL Server. It doesn't quite give you all the capability, but it does allow you to run a SQL Server instance on the Microsoft Azure platform. Google, which we're all familiar with, the giant that they are, they have something called the Google Cloud Platform, and that's equivalent to AWS or Azure. And then they have a subset of that called Compute Engine, and that is equivalent to EC2. So if you need a massive amount of computing power to do things like crunch the genome, you can use the Compute Engine to be able to do that. App Engine is most similar to Beanstalk, where you can run your apps in dedicated space, your apps meaning .NET websites, PHP websites, Java websites, things along those lines. Not really the apps that you would find on your mobile device, but applications in the web, you run that on their app engine. One of them that we're all familiar with, Apple iCloud. And that's one of them where people just click a button on their phone and boom, I'm using the cloud. Once again, don't know what it is, but I know that I need to use it because if I drop my phone in the pool, my pictures come back when I get my new phone. Data centers around, Contigix I mentioned here, locally in St. Louis, runs Mira Cloud. And it's similar to Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or the Google Cloud Platform, but it's their own cloud that they offer time on. And then you might have heard of Rackspace. That's another popular data center where a lot of people are consuming or purchasing time. And then there are all the private clouds that are out there. There's the Fortune 500 and the Fortune 1000 companies that are using their own clouds. And this is my personal opinion. It would be AWS, Google, and then Microsoft. And I love Microsoft. I'm a big fan of them. But that's, as far as ease of use goes, that's how I would rank them. How do people use the cloud? Our next topic. Most popular is a mobile device integration. So I have things like Dropbox for pushing and pulling my files. I have things like iCloud. My music, is essentially stored up in the cloud where I can download it again. I can consume music, I can consume files, I can consume apps, all from the cloud. So definitely the most popular. Once again, it's always pay as you go. Salesforce is a great example. I don't want to have to buy a CRM, put it on premise, put servers in place and the whole deal, so I'm just going to pay $65 a month and I'm off and running. A lot of the most popular ones that you'll see, iCloud, Dropbox, OneDrive, and S3. OneDrive is Microsoft's storage product, S3 is Amazon's storage product, but they all essentially do the same thing. They store your files in the cloud so that if I build it on this device, I can pull it down on this device and I can pull it down on my desktop at the office. So then data backups, that's another big one, and that really reflects what's above at the iCloud, Dropbox, and things like that. But there also are specific cloud backup strategies. So there's a company that we use called Gilware, and what we do is we push all of our files up into their cloud. And so if there is an on-site server or a laptop or something that I have additional files, we can use cloud backups to make sure that that gets backed up securely. The next one is spinning up servers. What that basically means is I need a server today. I don't want to have to call Hewlett-Packard. I don't want to have to wait 2 weeks. I don't want to have to spend $6,000 or $7,000. I don't want to have to find a data center. I don't want to have to plug it all in. I want it today. It's really all about cost and it's all about efficiency. So you don't have to buy the server. It would take 2 weeks lead time to get a server in. Or if I've got one, I don't have to configure it. It's kind of sitting there waiting for me and ready to go. Those are the big things. On-demand Elastic servers. There are some certain clients that we deal with that need this much server today, but in 3 hours they need this much server. So they're going to go out and they're going to use an Elastic thing, and Beanstalk is a good example of this, where they need to ramp up and run a big job. So let's say that the Genome Project is collecting data for a week, but then the next week they need to actually crunch all the data. The Elastic servers will allow you to double, triple, quadruple, whatever the server power, and then crunch it back down where you're not paying for it. So you only pay for what you need. And then database services is another one. A license of SQL Server costs a couple $1,000, plus you need to put a server on it. So an easy way of doing database services is through the cloud, where you, as part of your purchasing, you get to use the licensing of the server. So it's all included in the package. Okay, the number one question, where is my data? And there is really no way to know. If you look at Google, take a look sometime. This is really, truly interesting. They have data centers in the most remote, unique locations in the world. One of them actually is in a power plant in the Ukraine. I forget the numbers, but it never gets above 40 degrees outside, I think, below 40 below outside. So all they do is pump in the cold air from the outside and they flush it out of the data center, and then they just recycle it. So the cost associated with cooling those massive data centers is almost nil, other than the air exchangers. There's a certain level of trust that comes along with actually getting connected to these guys. It is true that it is all over the world due to the redundancy. So your data could very well be in the Ukraine and in Southern California and in the Philippines, and they spread it all over like that so that there is redundancy, so that if the Ukraine would go down for some reason, all of a sudden your website doesn't go down. It's going to do what we said earlier about the private public, and it's going to kick over to another location so that your websites don't actually go down. So what you really need to do with any kind of a cloud situation is you need to read the fine print. You need to understand if you can find out where your data is. And with some larger implementations, they may say, yeah, you're going to be in our Ukraine data center. It really just depends. But with most of us, we're not going to know. So the key is we don't know where our data is, but then the question is, how do we get it back? And can we get it back? And who owns it? One thing to know is you are on the same server as other customers. So back to our example of Amazon, people actually could see each other's stuff. So just know that you could be your recipes could be sitting next to your pictures, which could be sitting next to somebody else's pornography, So you never know what it is that you're sitting next to, which, there are some liabilities with that, especially if viruses would get in. But they do try to partition it off and segment it off so that you're not going to trip over each other and you're not going to be able to see each other's stuff. They've done a really good job with that over the years. So back to that conversation of, is my data safe? Most likely your data is safe. All technology is only as safe as the passwords, the firewalls, the updates that you have to your operating system, what kind of sticky notes you leave laying around on your desk, what kind of things you throw into your trash that aren't shredded. That's social engineering. That's how most companies or hackers are going to get into your stuff. If your password is dog123, I can launch a reverse dictionary attack against your password, and I'll have it in just a couple seconds. I'll know what it is. Now, if it's D0G!23, and I would add a couple of characters onto that to make it at least 8. Now I can't hack it as easily. The statistics are out there if you go look at it, but it's literally a couple of seconds to hack a weak password to millennia to hack a strong password. A strong 10-digit password, it will take a lifetime to hack, literally. So that's one of the most important things. The security of your data depends on the configuration of the service. An application is only going to be as good as the coder that wrote it, the guy who typed on the keyboard, and the cloud configuration is only going to be as safe and secure as the person who put the configuration together. So knowing who is on the other end or knowing who's doing the work for you is important in a lot of cases. Depends on the strength of your password. We talked about that. Once again, read the fine print. I can't stress that enough. There are cloud agreements out there that say that you no longer own your data. They become the property of the cloud provider. So make sure that you see who owns your data and how you get your data back. That's the next one. So down on the bottom of the list, how do I get my data back? It's not unlikely that Amazon is going to go away, but should Amazon Web Services go away, how do I get online and how do I think if I've got to pull all my code, I've got to pull databases, data inside the databases, all of that back. How am I going to get all that back so that I have control of it again? One way to ensure that is backups. So a lot of people will put things in the cloud, but they don't necessarily realize that there needs to probably be another backup. I'm not necessarily saying your pictures or your music, but your organization's website and the SQL database that runs your organization, there should be another completely disparate mechanism that you use to back that up and to make sure that you're getting that somewhere else. And it's typically good to get it out of a different seismic zone. So here, for instance, in St. Louis, we would want to back up to Chicago. They're off of our seismic plates, so the big natural disasters that might take place won't affect Chicago. Regional disasters like tornadoes, fires, things like that, you want to get it out of a given area, but really it should be out of a given region so that your backup is taken care of. We need to know how the provider is giving you redundancy and what their backup policies are. So are you paying for a single instance? Like if I sign up for an Amazon Web Service, a typical server is about $125 a month, and it gives me a server. So it's not necessarily backing up my data, and it's not necessarily redundant. It should be redundant in the sense that it's Amazon. They're not going to let a piece of their cloud go down, but it is likely that it could go down. And once again, finding out if they're doing backups or if it's your responsibility to do the backups. Again, read the fine print. Make sure you understand what it is that's going on. Back up your data to another location, and then understand your rights with regards to your data. Who owns them? When do you own it? Did you ever relinquish rights? Is it all still yours? How do you get it back? That's probably the most important part about using the cloud. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So to recap, most of us see it on our mobile devices, or we see it on our Surface or our iPad, and we're using Dropbox, or we're using S3 or OneDrive or something like that. But getting a little bit deeper into it, we see that we're using the cloud more than we actually realize it with things such as Salesforce, other people's websites, you know, how we're doing our own data backups, things along those lines. So really the key is to know as much as you can about it. By all means, find out where your data's at, but then read the fine print and know exactly where it's at, who owns it, how you get it back.